Today's daily puzzle is a study composed by O. Daler, and oh boy, it's a good one. Now, you may be wondering, Dane, why are you saying that this is a good puzzle? Why are you even calling this a puzzle? After all, the first move in the puzzle solution is pretty straightforward, following the wise words of chess philosopher and grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, push 'em, baby. Yeah, we just push that passed pawn, we're ready to promote it, and on top of it, by advancing this pawn forward, notice that the king is unable to reach the pawn's promotion square. And the only other possible defender isn't a likely candidate to succeed. The light squared bishop, playing on the opposite colored keys of the piano compared to our dark square promotion. Now this is where the magic starts. It looks like black can just resign, but instead black says, hey, why don't you just take my bishop for free? Well, this isn't the most generous of offers, because if we capture the bishop, black will capture our newly promoted piece, and then it's a draw. But on the other hand, this seems to have nothing to do with us promoting our pawn into a queen. And that's precisely the point. It's stalemate. Because the bishop is on e8, pinned to its own king, and our king dominates these dark squared escape squares for the king, and it just so happens the light squared bishop is restricting the king's other escape square, it's stalemate. Black isn't in check, but there's no legal move to play. And for you contrarians in the audience wanting to under-promote this queen into a rook, well, that's the same story. A rook would also pin the bishop to the king, once again, creating a stalemate. Okay, so the first move in our puzzle solution was pretty clear, but now we've been hit with a tremendous roadblock. Bishop e8 is an ingenious defensive try. If we defend the pawn, well then black would just sacrifice the bishop, and we don't have sufficient mating material. If we do nothing, black will happily capture this pawn. If we capture the bishop, insufficient mating material results, another draw. And if we promote to a major piece, a queen or a rook, it's stalemate. So that means our only option is to promote the pawn, but not into a queen, not into a rook. When I think of under promotion studies, I generally think about a knight. Perhaps it avoids stalemate, or maybe the knight delivers some sort of critical tempo move against the king. As we can see, that's not the case here. The knight is unable to confront the king, and if you're like me and have ever struggled trying to win a knight and bishop versus king ending, you know how difficult that is. Well, now we're adding an extra defender, the bishop. So under promoting to a knight doesn't seem like a clear answer. So that leaves us with one and only one choice, the rare under promotion to a dark squared bishop. So now we're rocking the bishop pair, which is a great ending to study. Two bishops versus king. Learning that mating pattern is fun and also really instructive. But here it isn't just two bishops versus the king. Black has an extra bishop on the board. But the problem is the king is unable to move, so the bishop has to move somewhere. And wherever the bishop moves, let's say somewhere along this diagonal, we want to think about the space left behind. Sure, the king is able to move there if needed, but after bishop e7, notice the king is unable to move in this direction. We force the king to e8, and now that the bishop is no longer guarding this diagonal, we take advantage of that diagonal left behind, delivering one of the many instructive two bishop mates. Now I said the bishop can move anywhere along this diagonal, which is true, but what if the bishop moves here? Is that a mouse slip? No, it's yet another tricky bishop defense trying to lead us astray. Black is basically saying, hey, take the free piece. And suddenly we take a big bite into stale bread. It's stalemate again. But once again, the lesson rings true. The bishop is unable to meditate on both diagonals. So here we can play bishop e7. Once again, the king can stumble into mate. And if the king heads in the other direction, now we're happily willing to capture that piece, confronting the king, gaining a tempo. I leave it to the interested viewer to see how to win this endgame. It's really instructive, and we have a number of chess.com drills that can help you learn this pattern, and we also have videos that show you the technique. Okay, so the main point is if the bishop floats on this diagonal, after we throw in a check, we're going to take advantage of the space that bishop left behind. Now what if the bishop decides to float on this diagonal? Well, starting with a short hop to d7, well in this case we have a forced mate in 2. The king is forced to e8, and now the light squared bishop actually gets in the way of its king's escape, delivering a rather picturesque mate. If the bishop moves to say c6, now we need to be careful, because if we play bishop e7 immediately, now the king does escape. The problem is we can't deliver check and prevent the king from floating to the d7 square. And if we play a move like, say, bishop e6, well, this certainly does a great job restricting the king, but black's bishop can just simply bide time, moving to, I don't know, b5, let's say a4, and there just isn't a way to make any clear progress here. Once again, bishop f7 leaves the d7 square behind. So unlike the previous example when the bishop moved to this diagonal, when we were more than happy to encourage the king to e8, when we were able to deliver mate, now that the bishop guards this diagonal, we need to modify our plans a little bit. Now before I show you bishop f7, I might as well just make the point that in the puzzle the bishop does move to a4, which is exactly the same story as the bishop moving to c6. Once again, the bishop guards the critical diagonal e8 to a4, so trying to force the king to e8 just doesn't work out. So in this case, we're going to lock down the light squares, preventing the king from using the newly vacated e8 square. And now that we've locked down the light squares, there's no way to defend our newly underpromoted bishop to do its magic, delivering mate. So the puzzle continues with that familiar bishop e8. But this time the bishop on e8 is out of tricks. We simply deliver mate. Well, thanks for navigating that promotion commotion with me in today's daily puzzle. This is National Master Dane Mattson, and I'll see you next time.